Hi, this is Tom Rhodes. Please join me as I scour the four corners of the earth to bring you interesting, intelligent, funny people who will enrich your life with wisdom and laughter. I'll take you to Europe, Australia, all over America. I'll take you to the peaks of Machu Picchu, the canals of Amsterdam, the Great Wall of China, or the swamps of Florida, and certainly the many, many comedy clubs and comedy theaters all over the world. Come hang out with me and meet the many interesting people that pop up in my life as I travel the world as a stand-up comedian. You're listening to Tom Rhodes Radio Smart Camp. Karate kick, baby. Rock and roll. Hey, I want to thank Josh Pryor for sending me that opening theme song. Very nice of you, Josh. Josh sent me about 4 or 5 songs, and I greatly appreciate it. I wasn't going to put out another podcast episode this week. It's funny, in the intro I say, I'll take you to the cliffs of the peaks of Machu Picchu, the canals of Amsterdam, the Great Wall of China. I was at the Great Wall of China a few weeks ago. And now I'm taking you to the Crown Plaza Hotel in Rosemont, Illinois. I'm speaking to you. I'm in the suburbs. It's by the O'Hare Airport, and Zany's Comedy Club. I was at Zany's downtown Chicago last week. The 4th oldest comedy club in America. Been playing there for 30 years. Wonderful people. Love each and every one of them like family. So they have a suburban room, which is actually a newer, modern, much nicer club in Rosemont, and it's managed by Dan Carlson. And Jesus, I knew Dan from back in the Florida days, old Chicago guy. He did the Chicago Comedy Festival in 1998 and 1999, and it was me, Mitch Hedberg, Louis C.K., Earthquake, Daniel Tosh. It was just an incredible lineup that he had, and nobody knew these comedians at that time. Remarkable human achievement in stand-up comedy. But anyway, now Dan manages the Zanies in Rosemont, and it's always, it's a nice, easy, uneventful week. And I had planned on passing my time, reading, whatever, sending some emails, setting up dates for next year, Skyping with my wife, the things that a comedian does when he's in a comedy club that's not in the heart of a big city. So the name of this episode is My Official Statement, and I want to tell you a story now, and I'm going to be reading to you today. I've read to you in the past. I know you can handle it, but I think you'll find this interesting, and I guess I'm not really taking you to the peaks of Machu Picchu or the Crown Point Hotel in Rosemont, Illinois, I guess I'm also taking you to the swamps of Florida, because I think it's some pretty swampy shit that happened that made me have to address this. So, of course, I'm talking about the Louie Anderson story. The Louie Anderson story I told on my last album, All Hail Laughter, and then Ashna talked about when the whole Me Too movement came out. Ashna, my wife, was telling me about, times she had been sexually harassed, working in Holland and different times in her life. And then I told the story about, this, and I've told it on stage, and I told it on my last album, about what happened to me when Louie Anderson tricked me and got me to come back to his apartment when I was 19 years old, and I had just had won a contest in Florida. And the grand prize was I got to fly to Los Angeles and perform at the Comedy Store. Anyway, the details we'll go over further. I think you already know the story. So, but it was a pretty serious incident when it happened to me at the time. I didn't tell anybody for years. I thought this guy wanted to be my friend. He invites me to hang out with him. And then he said he needed to go by his apartment to pick something up. And then the next thing I know, he cornered me and he tried to kiss me. And he squeezed my ass with both hands firmly. So, I can joke about it now. It's been many years. But at the time, I was ashamed. And I think, partly for being tricked by the man, but also I felt ashamed at my own stupidity and my own naivety for not realizing what was happening. And that's the humor in the story that I tell on the stage. I say that I'm a small-town hayseed, just fell off the turnip truck, had never been to Los Angeles before. I think famous guy wants to be my friend. I think it's kind of a timeless tale. And it's, it's what happened to me. And it's my story. So last year, after I did that podcast with Ashna, this British comedy website called Chortle wrote this story, and it said, and they quoted from my joke. They gave away the punchline. And the punchline, if you don't know, if you're a casual listener to Tom Rhodes Radio Smart Camp, is I can't help but thinking back on that moment all these years later and thinking how much further my career would have gone if I would have just fucked that guy. It's a joke. Human beings, and especially comedians, make jokes to deal with problems and things that bother them. Of course, I don't feel that way. It's called sarcasm. And anyway, the Chortle, which I think is a bullshit website to begin with. They've written a few reviews of me. In the last review they did in Edinburgh, the woman who wrote it, Julia Chamberlain, who I've known for years, she booked jonglers. She wrote that I was too polished. That these American comedians come over with such self-confidence. And don't we wish the Brits had that kind of self-confidence? It was weird. It was like she was praising me, but at the same time, not enthusiastically. It was a strange fucking review. So, Chortle Magazine, I know the founder, the man who runs it, and I know several of the writers. Comedy is a small world. And anybody could start their own website. And playing in England and doing Edinburgh, and there are many people from Chortle website, the Chortle whatever .com, that could have contacted me before they wrote that story and asked for a statement, but they did not. They wrote that story in order to create clickbait, because the headline of that story that they ran last year was, Tom Rhodes accuses fellow comic Louie Anderson of sexual assault. And, it pissed me off that they wrote that article. It pissed me off that they didn't contact me. And then that headline, it really pissed me off. And it really made me think about it for a long, long time. I was tempted to write them a long, scathing email. My lovely and talented, brilliant wife advised me against it, just to let it pass. But basically, after deep contemplation about it, well, I mean, I don't know how much deep contemplation was needed. It was the initial anger that I felt when I read that chortle thing was I was not sexually assaulted. And I do not believe that I was tricked by a creepy older man who put me in a creepy situation, and it wasn't really deep contemplation. It was the first burst of anger that I had. And the anger is this: I know and love and am related to people who have been sexually assaulted and raped. It's not my place to talk about it, and it's their story, but nothing disturbs me more than like I've never done a rape joke. The topic fucking deeply disturbs me because I know and love people who have been raped and or sexually assaulted, and I think and it's what I wanted to tell Chortle in my angry email that I started and then was never allowed to send, was that it is an insult to the real victims of sexual assault to take little minor instances like this and try and create a sensational, viral, fucking explosion of to drive some traffic to their little shitty comedy website. Chortle put this salacious headline on their story, and it's funny. And I run into the guy at comedy festivals, the guy who's in charge of Chortle. So it's funny, like people think that you can just write whatever you want online and you'll never have to face consequences. I'm not saying that there'll be consequences, but I will have some words with the man the next time I see him. And anyway, I let it pass, and that was a year ago. But that's basically my feeling, I never claimed, and I've had this conversation with my wife, some different female friends, and some male friends that I talked with about this Chortle story when it came out. When I talked about my story, about what happened with Louie Anderson, they said, "Oh no, you were sexually assaulted." And I said, No. I was tricked by a creepy older man who put me in a creepy situation. And I was not sexually assaulted. I was not punched or penetrated. And I think a line has to be drawn now with this, God bless, praise be to Allah, whatever your imaginary deity, just thank goodness for the Me Too movement, because there are some dark, shady fucking characters, not only in show business, in every aspect of life. And I think that the minor infractions of an ass getting squeezed or a comment or whatever, things like that should not be defined as sexual assault, because I think it takes away, I think it's, and some of the people I know who have been sexually assaulted have never been brave enough to talk publicly about it because it's such a difficult issue for them. And that's where my anger comes from. I think that I think it belittles serious crimes, and you know what I'm saying. The victims of rape and sexual assault. I think it just belittles them and any uh, invitation that they would have to speak publicly or try and gain some healing from it, I think to make a big deal out of something that happened 30 years ago. Yeah, sure. I talked about it on a podcast and I told a joke about it and I put the joke on my last album. And people had told me at the time when I would do the story and when I put out the album, some comedian friends of mine said, "Do you worry about Louie Anderson hearing this?" And my reaction was, well, don't I get anything out of the story? At least I should get a story out of it. I've tried to be a gentleman my whole life. I'm sure there were a few times I wasn't always a saint, but I think I've always had respect for women. I love my mother. I loved my sister. I think that is a primary reason. And I don't know. It just, all of this just came back into light 2 days ago because of this reporter I got an email from at the Tampa Bay Times. So I guess I think you know how I feel. I just, to try and make a story that I was sexually assaulted by Louie Anderson from my joke, the story, it's not a joke, it's a story of something that really happened to me. And it took me 20 years before I could start telling anybody about this. Oh, and here's the thing. The chortle story made me kind of feel like I needed to defend Louie Anderson. That he, it's, I don't think he's completely innocent in this situation, but he's not a dark, sexual deviant monster, is what I'm saying. So, God, what was the point? Shit, I lost my point. But I felt like I had to defend the guy. But this was the point, that it did affect me because I did not go to the Comedy Store for years. I avoided going to the Comedy Store in Los Angeles for fear of running into him, and I think that's something that people have had to deal with and stuff. But now it's 30 years later, and I live in Los Angeles, and I'm a regular at the Comedy Store. And this story is a distant memory for me. And one of the reasons it's a distant memory for me was because a few years ago, I started going back to the Comedy Store. And I told this story on stage a couple times. And I said, I've avoided this place forever because of this. And then that's what made me start telling that joke, and it gave me healing. And if you've ever experienced anything traumatic or heartbreaking or unpleasant, jokes are the number one way that I've learned survival, and it's a coping mechanism. Anyway, so why don't we kick off this little story that I'm going to tell you. My official statement, the reason I'm put in this situation is because Jay Cridlin. Okay, here you go. I get this email September 12th, 2018. Hi there. This is Jay Cridlin. I'm a writer from the Tampa Bay Times in Florida. I don't know if this goes straight to Tom or a publicist/manager. But I'm working on a story that, as it turns out, relates to him and All Hail Laughter. And I have something I kind of need to run by him. Can you let me know if this email works? And then I'll get more specific. Or feel free to call at the number below. Thanks. And then it's just the letter J. And then under that is his little Jay Cridlin, pop music / culture critic, Tampa Bay Times. And then it took me a minute to figure out that this used to be the St. Petersburg Times. They changed their name. And the St. Petersburg Times, one of my oldest best friends in life from middle school and high school, Jim Webster, worked for the St. Petersburg Times for years. And I've been to the building many, many times to go meet Jim, have lunch with him. Jim Webster now works at the Washington Post. And Jim Webster is one of my oldest best friends. And I know many people that used to work at this newspaper. Okay, so I write him back. Hi, Jay, this is me. What do you need? Hey, Tom, thanks so much for the quick reply. This is Jay Cridlin an hour later. Hey, Tom, thanks so much for the quick reply. I'm the Times music pop culture critic. And you know the PR drill. When comics go on the road, they do local press to drum up publicity and sell tickets and such. I end up doing a lot of these interviews for the Times. So tomorrow, I'm interviewing Louie Anderson. To my knowledge, he has never addressed your story from the podcast and All Hail Laughter. But I'm going to ask about it. It's not like I'm just out to stir shit up. And I frankly don't expect much to come of it. I figure he'll evade or shrug it off. The worst that can happen is that he cuts the interview short. But given the climate of our culture is in right now, especially within the comedy community, it feels appropriate to bring up. And because he's got a few misspellings in this email, and because of the nature of the story and the Me Too movement and the fact that it's your story, your is capitalized, this is the rare article where, to me, it felt fair to loop you in. Obviously, Louie Anderson is on tour. He's doing a newspaper interview to promote his gig, and I know he wrote a book recently about his mother. So obviously, Louie Anderson is just doing press, and this guy, Jay Cridlin, is trying to stir shit up. I understand if you want no part of the story. You've talked about it enough on your own platforms. But do you have anything to add as I go into my interview? You guys have not talked since the incident, right? Do you know if others have brought it up to him? This is a little awkward to discuss over email, so please feel free to give me a call at the number below if you want to chat further, either on or off the record. Either way, regardless of what he says, I'd like to run it by you before we publish a story, in case he says something you might want to respond to. Thanks much, Jay. I've never understood that thanks much ending. So here's my response. Jay, please don't bring that story up to him. After the podcast where I talked about it, this British comedy website called Chortle ran a story about it with the headline, Tom Rhodes accuses fellow comic Louie Anderson of sexual assault. This disturbed me greatly because I do not feel like I was sexually assaulted. Many people I have spoken with about this disagree and tell me they think I was. The more I think about it, the more I understand that Louie was just a closeted gay person operating under the constraints of our society at that time. He did not do anything disturbing like expose himself or masturbate in front of me. When he saw that I was against his advances, he backed off me and did not force himself on me any further than what I described. I have not spoken to him since, and I do not wish to be his friend. However, I do think that he is a comedy legend who has brought laughter to a great number of people. Any attempt to cluster him in with the men who are accused of seriously heinous behavior, I think would be unfair if it is based on my story. To bring this up to him tomorrow, in my opinion, would be for the sole purpose of stirring shit up. If you would like to discuss this on the phone, please let me know. Many thanks, Tom. Many thanks is a much better way to end an email than thanks much. Okay, so then he writes, thanks for the response. It does give me a bit more to think about. I feel like hashtag #MeToo in general is the topic of the day in comedy culture right now, for obvious reasons. And even if your story had never come to light, I'd still be asking him about it as a general matter. Really? So every comedian has to address the Me Too movement? Really? Does every man of God have to be asked about Catholic priest molestation? That's a very strange that he would be bringing up the Me Too movement to every comedian. Really? The St. Pete Times, which I know from growing up in Florida and one of my best friends working at the St. Pete Times. The St. Pete Times is like a family newspaper. And anyway, when I spoke to him on the phone, I told him all this. We'll get to the phone call in a minute. Let's one thing at a time here. Okay, hearing you talk about Louie, let's go over that. Let's start over that. This is fucking too good. Thanks for the response. It does give me a bit more to think about. I feel like hashtag #MeToo in general is the topic of the day in comedy culture right now, for obvious reasons. What are the obvious reasons? Bill Cosby, Louis C.K.? I don't fucking get it. And even if your story had never come to light, I'd still be asking him about it as a general matter. Hearing you talk about Louis on your album and podcast inevitably changes the tone of that discussion, as does hearing how you feel about it now. So I definitely appreciate your updated perspective and will absolutely keep it in mind. Really? Oh, thanks. You're the fucking... To that end, if I do bring it up to Louis, would you be okay with me quoting your email? Otherwise, I'm fine referring back to what's already out there. As for this chortle story, yes, I saw that. The chortle story is why he's writing the fucking story. Because he wants a clickbait story for the Tampa Bay Times. Family Florida newspaper has now gone sensationalistic, clickbait, internet, fucking whatever. As for the chortle story, yes, I saw that. It seems to be really the only piece about this. But it's based entirely off your podcast. It doesn't seem like they reached out to you at all. My hope in asking both you and Louis about it directly is that it might clarify the record and your perspective. Thanks, Jay. Yeah, it's a private matter that didn't need to go public. It's not that big of a deal, Jay. Yeah, I mean, hey, and I did talk about it on my podcast, and I did put out an album with that story on it. So, okay, maybe I do need to address it. But anyway, you can tell that I'm a little angry over this. So here's what I write back to him. Chortle did not reach out to me. In my opinion, they were creating clickbait and trying to draw traffic to their site. Because of it, I was put in the position to think hard over the incident that I experienced. For many years, I felt like I had been violated. But after the rise of the Me Too movement and the many disturbing stories that have been brought to light, I no longer feel that way. I think he was an older, famous man making his move on a young, naive person in the same business. It is a tale as old as show business itself. When I rebuffed his advances, he respectfully backed off me. I see no reason why you should bring this up to him, Jay. There appears to be some real dark characters being exposed currently, and I would not include my experience with Louis among them. Out of respect to the real victims of sexual assault, I think you should not bring this up to him tomorrow. My story is exactly that. Just a story of something that happened to me. I was not assaulted. I was tricked by an older man, which has been a part of the mating ritual since humans first evolved and began to walk upright. I'm kindly asking, not I'm asking kindly not to question him about me, and I thank you for respecting my wishes. I'm sorry. Let me read that last sentence one more time, just in case Jay Cridlin ever listens to this podcast. And I think I've kind of already said that on the previous email. I specifically asked him not to bring it up. So I end the second email with him. I'm asking you kindly not to question him about me, and I thank you for respecting my wishes. So then Jay writes, hey, sorry I was in a meeting and am headed into a doctor's appointment, but I feel like maybe we should talk by phone briefly, on or off the record, if you have a minute later. Is there a time that might work for you to call me? So then I called him, and I talked to him for like an hour. I had a very long, sincere conversation with this guy, and I told him, I said, my main point is that I think this is that it's obviously an attempt to draw traffic online to their website by writing a salacious story. And that I think that by doing that, this is an insult to the real victims of sexual assault. And I told the guy that I've known Jim Webster since I was fucking 12 years old. Jim worked at the St. Petersburg Times forever, and I know for a fact that the St. Pete Times, now the Tampa Bay Times, is a family-friendly newspaper. They don't, there's all kinds of shit they don't write about. And I said I did not know them to be the hardball, hardcore investigative journalism in spirit of Vice or whoever, and that it was completely unnecessary, and that Louie Anderson is closeted. He's not an out gay person. And then Jay Cridlin brought up to me that there was a guy that was trying to blackmail Louie Anderson in the 90s. And those stories are online, and there's all kinds of details about that. It's not my place to point that out. I felt bad that happened to Louie. And, so I said, well, but Louie Anderson is one of America's most beloved clean comedians. He does clean humor, and the world is kind of fucked up right now. There's a lot more important issues that need to be addressed, like what's happening with our president and our government and our country and fucking everything. Even local news stories in Tampa. There's more important things than to bring up this to Louie Anderson. There's no reason to put him on the spot. And basically, I had a really long conversation with the guy, and and he disagreed with me that he felt that it was important that he bring this up to him because no one had ever asked him before on record how had he heard the Tom Rhodes story and had he commented on it. And I told Jay Cridlin, and if you're listening, Jay, I told you this. I said that if you bring this up to Louie, I think it's a cheap shot. And I think you're punching down on Louie Anderson. It's a cheap shot. It's a cheap, shitty thing to do, and you should be ashamed of yourself. And I wrote it anyway. You'll see. I wrote the guy. I said it's amazing. I've played in Tampa every year, probably for the last there's been a few years I've skipped, but I've played in Tampa forever. My friend Jim Webster wrote about me a few times, or had the entertainment writer when I had the sitcom and different shit. Jim got me in touch with different entertainment people. I liked having an inside connection with that newspaper. I felt like, it's like when like Blake Bortles went to my high school, and he's the quarterback for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't like Jacksonville or the Jaguars, and I find myself rooting for them because this guy that went to my high school with plays for them. I mean, it's a weird thing about loyalties, So so I feel like like a kinship to this newspaper because my dream was to be a comedian, and my friend Jim's, his was to be a journalist, and I was proud of him, and I was proud he worked for one of the top newspapers in Florida, and it's whatever, nothing sacred, and obviously no one has integrity anymore, and obviously everyone has given up the standards of decency, and Jay Cridlin, I think you did a cheap, shitty thing, and the pop music culture critic to be going after. Anyway, you'll see my fucking response. I'm already getting worked up. So it just pisses me off that I wrote 2 emails asking him not to bring this up, and then I called him and spoke to him for an hour on the phone, and sincerely, and like I said, I feel like I'm defending Louie Anderson, which I shouldn't have to do that. It's just fucked up. I mean, I have sympathy for Louie Anderson. Do I want to be his friend? No. But a cheap shot is a cheap shot. And your integrity and your work and your business and what's the standards of human decency. And I pretty much laid it out for him. And I sincerely spoke to this guy on the phone and through these emails asking him not to do this. So here's, this is September 13th. This is the next day after the previous day. I sent him 2 emails and had an hour phone conversation with him. Hi, Tom. Just wanted to follow up. I talked to Louie today, and it was a good conversation that touched on many topics. Oh, I bet you just couldn't wait to get through the other topics to hit him with your big sledgehammer. I did bring up your story, asking if he was aware of it. At first he demurred and didn't really want to comment. But then he had a change of heart. Here was his response. This is in quotations from Louie Anderson. I really regret that Tom felt put upon and felt uncomfortable. I had no idea. I was a big flirt back then, and so that's a possibility that happened, and I regret that. I regret that he would be put in that position, and I'm truly sorry for it. So that's it. Everybody's conditioned just to apologize. I didn't need an apology from Louie Anderson. Like I said, and I had really good conversations with Bill Burr about this. Bill was fascinated with this story. And talking with Bill, it's a great thing about having so many comedian friends. It's, you can work out sort of therapeutic issues. And having, conversations with Bill Burr about it, really came to understand that Louie Anderson, when he hit on me at the time, he was really just a gay person operating under the constraints of society at that time. It's, big deal. I was tricked. I mean, sure, it's not a crime, and no crime was committed. That's why I feel like I'm defending Louie Anderson. And it's kind of fucked up because, whatever. It's just, and then this society where people get caught and put on the floor, and then it's always this, I regret it, and I'm sorry. And I didn't need that from Louie Anderson. Jay Cridlin, are you happy? Anyway, And my response is coming up. This is just the details leading up to my official response. So yeah, let me get through this. So I wanted to see if you'd like to respond. Okay, all right, let's fucking back this up. Let's go over what Louie said, and then you think about what you would respond, being me. Okay, here's Louie's response. Here was his response. I really regret that Tom felt put upon and felt uncomfortable. I had no idea. I was a big flirt back then. And so that's a possibility that happened. And I regret that. I regret that he would be put in that position. And I'm truly sorry for it. So I wanted to see if you'd like to respond. If not, I understand. I can say you had no comment. If you want offer a quote, it's a lot of misspellings for a guy who works for a newspaper. But if you want offer a quote summing up how you feel about it now, I will include it. If you'd prefer, I can just pull a short quote from our emails or the notes I took yesterday when we talked. So much for off the record. I knew nothing's off the record. You got to know that. And I knew that. I didn't give a fuck. I mean, I was sincerely, talking to the guy, human to human. And that's what I told him. I said, there's no reason for you to run this story. It's punching down. It's cruel. And most importantly, it is an insult to the real victims of sexual assault. So I could not have been more clear. If nothing else, I'd at least like to mention that you've retired the bit from your act, and you see the incident differently since bringing it to light. That much does seem worth noting. Thanks much, Jay. Okay, and here's my response yesterday, September 13th. Jay, it is a pity that you still felt the need to bring this up to him after I sincerely asked you not to. Considering the full life I have lived and the hit television show he is on, that you felt the need to question him over an incident that happened 30 years ago. Can you tell me what quotes of mine you will be using in this story? Okay, so I'm pissed. I had started to write an angry response to him, and then I stopped and backed off. And what was the there was something about the connection with the St. Pete Times, and what was it? And I told the guy, I had a mutual friend anyway, and then he writes me back. I don't have all my notes in front of me now, but yes, I will run it by you. It'll be short. I can send it later tonight. Thanks, Jay. Okay, so then later last night, he sends this, and I don't like that the guy keeps saying that I retired the bit. I mean, I told him that I didn't do the joke anymore. Since that chortle story came out, I just, I felt no need to tell it anymore. I did an album, and then you go on to start working on your new hour. That's how comedy works. But then also that chortle story made me stop telling it. So he writes me this back. This is last night. Here's the relevant quote and context. I might also quote the podcast and or album, though not the punchline. Because I told him chortle gave away the punchline. What kind of comedy website gives away punchlines? That was another thing that pissed me off about that chortle story. They gave away the punchline to the joke. I don't think they're for comedy. Okay, so here we go. This is his thing. Here's the relevant quote and context. I might also quote the podcast and or album, though not the punchline. Rhodes has since retired the story from his act and said his feelings on the incident have evolved as more stories from the Me Too movement have come to light. He has not spoken to Anderson, who he calls a comedy legend. but believes he should not be lumped in with the other accused harassers and abusers. Whatever I went through in that story, based on my knowledge of the man, I would not categorize him as a sexual deviant monster, which some people are being revealed to be right now. He said, me. I have great sympathy for the guy. So that's from our telephone conversation. I expressly, sincerely asked him, human to human, not to write this story, and I told him that based on my knowledge of the man, I would not categorize him as a sexual deviant monster, which some people are being revealed to be right now. So anyway, so that's it. He chose to run the story, and he was asking for my response, basically, if I had a comment. So after that, I sat down and I wrote. Let me find it. Yeah, so I wrote this big response. Here, let me. All right, here we go. So this is mine. Obviously, I was angry. I'm angry at this guy, Jay Cridlin. That's what I was going to say. I felt his connection to the St. Pete Times when my friend Jim Webster worked there. But, you know, he hasn't worked there in like 10 years, maybe? Yeah, my friend Jim moved on up to, he works for the Washington Post now. And, and hey, full disclosure, Jim loves food, and he co-wrote Mario Battelli's two cookbooks, last two cookbooks. And when the sexual abuse, whatever, when Mario Battelli got Me Too'd, whatever you want to call it, when he got called out for his sexual impropriety, my friend Jim was destroyed, crushed, because Mario was not only a friend, was a hero to him. So my issue, I mean, it's not funny, and it's, you know, my issue with the Tampa Bay Times is, you know, here I'm a guy from Florida, Central Florida. Orlando and Tampa is Central Florida, and I'm from that area, and I've had a pretty amazing life. You know, traveling the world as a comedian. You know, I mean, even just a few weeks ago, I was doing shows in China and Mongolia. Next month, I'm playing all over Europe. I've done nice things in television in Europe and the United States. And has the Tampa Bay Times ever written a story about me when I've performed in Tampa? No. The pop music, culture critic, Jay Cridlin, only found interest in me to devote some ink from the newspaper over a story that happened to me over 30 years ago. And so he feels like in his emails, he feels like it sounds like he feels the need to bring up that it's such a prevalent thing, the Me Too movement in comedy, that he like almost like he's a crusader, that he needs to bring it up. And I think that's what I find the most disgusting thing about this. That, you know, even Louie Anderson, the guy's done great things as a comedian. Even recently, the guy won an Emmy last year for Baskets. And he's playing a transgender, he's playing a woman, but I mean, the issue with transgender people now, trying to find a voice in America and a place in society, and the fact that Louie Anderson is a man playing a female character, I mean, I think those things are more relevant than calling Louie Anderson out on the floor for tricking anyway, I'm pissed. I'm still pissed. And that's why you're getting an extra podcast this week. My official statement is coming up right now. Okay, so Here's my official statement. I wrote this. I sat here yesterday for a couple hours before my show, and thank God I didn't email this after my show. And then I read this to Dan Carlson and the other comedians in the green room backstage, and they were all laughing hysterically. They thought this was very funny. So this is my official statement on the Louie Anderson story that happened to me that I wrote for Jay Cridlin yesterday. When Chortle.com first wrote about this story, I was angry because they had obviously written the story as clickbait without contacting me. The headline they put with their story was Tom Rhodes accuses fellow comic Louie Anderson of sexual assault. That made me give a good long thought over what had happened to me, and I strongly disagree. I know, love, and am related to people who have been sexually assaulted and raped. It is no joke, and there is nothing funny about it. I believe it is an insult to the real survivors of sexual assault and rape to compare this in hopes of creating a minor controversy. The truth remains that I do not believe that I was sexually assaulted, but I was put in a creepy situation. It set a precedent in my life, because any time I was with a woman and felt her pull back, I would completely step away, not push on, because I knew what it felt like to be hunted by the unwanted. He did get 2 handfuls of my plump, juicy ass, but I was probably wearing something revealing and giving out confusing signals. It did affect me, because I avoided the Comedy Store for years for fear of running into him. Now I live in Los Angeles and I'm a regular at the Comedy Store, so that is a distant memory for me now. I brought the story out of retirement last night and told it again. I did it with the preface that I had been put on the spot today by a reporter from the Tampa Bay Times who wanted to ask me about this before he interviewed Louie Anderson the next day. I told the audience last night that the Tampa Bay Times newspaper wanted my comment on this story before they talked to Louie Anderson. Then I told them the story of a young, naive kid from a small town who just fell off the turnip truck and had come to Hollywood for the first time. Young Rube meets a famous guy and then thinks famous guy wants to be his friend. It is the story that I tell on my last album. After I told the story, I told the audience that this reporter from the Tampa newspaper was waiting for my comment on this. I told them that if you are ever in a situation like that, with a rich, powerful, famous person, gobble that cock. Leap all over it. Spread your legs far and wide. Times are tough and good jobs are scarce. Please that man like you have pleased no other. Who knows if you'll ever be in that situation ever again? The comedy tool I am using here is extreme sarcasm. So my official comment to the Tampa Bay Times is that you have made the joke funnier. Thank you. I would like it noted that I have always liked Louie Anderson. He has done good work in comedy. I especially liked his children's cartoon. I truly believe that someone's sexual proclivities should never be an issue when it comes to discussing the merits of someone's chosen work, unless boundaries of decency have been crossed, of course. I want to applaud Jay Cridlin and the Tampa Bay Times for uncovering the story of a young kid from Oviedo, Florida, who went to Hollywood and got his ass squeezed by one of America's most beloved clean comedians. Over 30 years after it happened! ! I trust that this excellence in investigative reporting will be recognized for its contribution to journalism with the Pulitzer Prize that it so richly deserves. obviously laden with heavy sarcasm. And the audience thought it was hilarious. So I did the joke. So I sent this to Ashna. Ashna thought it's too long, and definitely she said it's funny, but you can't send all that. And then I needed another opinion, and another one of my oldest best friends, Jack Bulware, co-founder of Litquake, San Francisco's biggest literary festival, most prestigious literary festival. There's never any misspellings in any of Jack's emails. Anyway, Jack's one of my best friends, and I emailed him my statement and told him that I wanted to get his opinion on this. Oh, and then so I did the Louie Anderson story again last night. I wrote this, my official statement, to the Tampa Bay Times before I went to my show yesterday. So I was like still kind of seething and pissed. I mean, I don't know. I'm not really. Yeah, I guess I'm angry. Why is it so hard to admit when you're angry? And then, so I told the story again last night, and then also I said the part where, let me ask everybody in the audience, after I told the story, and I said, my advice to anybody, if you're put in that situation with a rich and powerful, famous person, gobble that cock, leap all over it. And obviously I'm fucking joking. That's what comedians do. Then I presented to the audience. I said, I emailed this reporter from the Tampa Bay Times, and I had a long phone conversation with him, and I explained to the audience last night. I said, I do not feel like I was sexually assaulted, and I know people who have been, and I think it's an insult to them. And I explained this to the reporter, and I said, I sincerely asked this reporter not to write about this. And I said, do you think, I want the audience to vote on this, do you think it was cruel and unfair and a cheap shot for Jay Cridlin to ask Louie Anderson that question in an interview where he is promoting a gig and he's asking him all these other random questions about his career and his life? And it was unanimous. The audience said, yes, that's cruel and unfair. Only one waiter and two waitresses did not raise their hand because they had trays full of drinks and were doing their jobs with dignity and standards of decency. So anyway, so my friend Jack writes me back, and he says, "Hey Tom, he's gonna quote at most one sentence of your email, right? It's a story about Louie. The story isn't about the relationship between the two of you." Jack writes me and thank God for intelligent, smart friends who talk you off the balcony when you're about to jump off the ledge. So Jack told me to keep it short and sweet and just pull these two sentences from. And then I talked to Ashna about it, and Ashna felt like, she said, well, you were affected by it, that you avoided the Comedy Store for years. She said, you can be casual about it now, but it did affect you for a long time because you didn't go to the Comedy Store. And so Ashna felt like I should insert that. And so from my official statement, and Jack, of course, thought the cock gobble part was extremely funny. But Jack told me I should just send him these it's good to have smart advisors. He said just send these two short sentences because they're not going to use barely anything. So this is what he advised me to use. I want to applaud Jay Cridlin and the Tampa Bay Times for uncovering the story of a young kid from Oviedo, Florida, who went to Hollywood and got his ass squeezed by one of America's most beloved clean comedians. See, Jack thought it crucial to remove the sentence where I put over 30 years ago. I would like it noted that I have always liked Louie Anderson. He's done good work in comedy. I especially liked his children's cartoon. I truly believe that someone's sexual proclivities should never be an issue when it comes to discussing the merits of someone's chosen work, unless boundaries of decency have been crossed, of course. And, that's another issue at stake here. And that's another reason why I wrote this, is I truly believe someone's sexual proclivities should never be an issue when it comes to discussing the merits of someone's chosen work. Who gives a fuck if somebody's gay or transgender or fucking likes anal beads, or I don't give a fuck. Are you entertaining? Do you make good jokes? Do you make good movies? Do you make good paintings? Do you write good stories for your newspaper? That's all I care about. I don't care, that's why I think it's like, it's almost like, and I told Jay Cridlin over the phone, you are going to expose this man and call him out. Well, okay, sure, I did that with my joke and talking about it on my podcast, but then again, I don't work for a family-friendly newspaper in Tampa, Florida. I have a podcast, I'm a comedian, and I'm not as famous as Louie Anderson or a lot of other people. Okay, so then here's the last message I got from Jay Cridlin today after I sent him those. So I said, this is my official response. I want to applaud Jay Cridlin and the Tampa Bay Times for uncovering the story of a young kid from Oviedo, Florida, who went to Hollywood and got his ass squeezed by one of America's most beloved clean comedians. I would like it noted that I have always liked Louie Anderson. He has done good work in comedy. I especially like his children's cartoon. I truly believe that someone's sexual proclivity should never be an issue when it comes to discussing the merits of someone's chosen work, unless boundaries of decency have been crossed, of course. Okay? Short and sweet, like my friend Jack advised me. Okay, and here is Jay Cridlin's response, his email that I got today. This is too long to include in full, but I'll add some of it. One thing. I personally don't mind the flip comment about me and the Times. Trust me, we get far worse from readers every day, and have printed far worse in our pages. But I would respectfully note that this topic is a sensitive one for many people, and it might not come across the same way to everyone. It might no longer bother you that you got your ass squeezed, but others might see the experience differently. And reading a comment that is somewhat flippant in tone might not come across as appropriate. That's just my 2 cents. But I can, if you like, paraphrase it to say that you did not feel this story was worth the further attention I gave it, and you asked me not to write it. Thanks. Capital J. And then I wrote him and I said, yes, please write that I said I did not feel the story was worth the further attention you gave to it, and that I asked you not to write it. So we'll see how that turns out in the Tampa newspaper. But that's basically it. If you're tricked by a older, famous, powerful comedian, person of power, politician, whoever the boss in your line of work is my advice to you, gobble that cock, leap all over it, spread your legs far and wide? No, of course not. I'm a comedian, and I'm making a joke. Always be on your toes, kids, and watch out for, and I don't know, I wouldn't, fucking human beings have sexual urges, and that prolongs our species. Everybody has desires and needs, and I have no problem with anyone's sexual orientation. And just, try not to find yourself in that situation. If you ever win the funniest person in Central Florida contest and you are going to Hollywood for the first time, beware that there are some people who might want to penetrate you and taste your illuminescent young skin. I don't know what's my advice to anybody. Try and stay happy. Endure the bumpy road as hard as you can. There are people in this life who put obstacles and make life a lot more unnecessary than it needs to be. I don't know why Jay Cridlin felt that he needed to be the hard-edged journalist with Louie Anderson, but I think it's a pretty cheap shot and kind of a punk-ass move to pull that on that guy. There's a lot more, there's a lot more bad shit going on in the world that needed to be exposed than calling Louie Anderson out for this story. Anyway, but maybe that's also a lesson here, is that if you're going to talk about something like I did, this story that was very personal to me and affected me greatly, I didn't even tell my fucking closest friends for years. I started telling comedians through the years when his name would come up. And then finally, through talking with friends of mine, I found some peace with it. So, if things are bothering you, talk to your best friends. And it's great that that Jim Webster from the Washington Post is my friend, and Jack Bulware from Litquake, and that I'm married to an amazing woman, and that I have this circle. I think that's the most important thing in life, is your circle of the close friends that you can vent to your anger, and they can tell you, yeah, don't send that email. But then, hey, look, now I'm probably going to have to answer for this, because obviously it was the podcast that I did where I talked about the Louie Anderson story, and the joke that I did about the Louie Anderson story on All Hail Laughter, my last album, is why I was contacted by the Tampa Bay Times wanting my official comment on the story. I'm fine with it. It's cool. And my listeners, I hope you found this entertaining. And it certainly gave me something to do. There's not much to do in Rosemont, Illinois, when the comedy club hasn't opened yet. And, there's some airline pilots in the lobby. That's interesting, because we're by, Zanies Rosemont is by O'Hare Airport. Last night at the audience was a lot of airline pilots in the audience. You can tell pilots. And I call these guys on the side of the stage. I go, you guys are pilots, aren't you? And they go, yeah. They wouldn't tell me what airline. But, and then there was 20 people, I'd say 15, 20 people. And then there was 5 people the night before who are from South Carolina and North Carolina. And they just got flights to Chicago, and they're staying here or in the area by the airport, because they're trying to avoid Hurricane Florence, which is slamming into Wilmington, North Carolina, where I lived as a boy. A wonderful place, Wilmington, North Carolina. So nobody laughs harder than people who are thinking that all of their possessions are being destroyed in a natural disaster. They were great audiences, and when I proposed the question to the audience last night, if they thought that it was cruel and unfair for Jay Cridlin to hit Louie Anderson with this story, it was pretty unanimous that everybody thought it was unnecessary. So that's my 2 cents. It's funny that Jay Cridlin thought that my short response was flippant. Good thing I didn't send the the gobble the cock official statement that I had wanted to, and that Dan Carlson and the other comedians found so funny in the green room last night. But you know what? Some things that comedians advise you to do aren't always the best for you. Like when you're invited back to someone's apartment for your first visit to Hollywood. Anyway, I think that's it, man. That's all I have to say on the matter. Is there anything else? Is there anything? My messages from Ashna here. Let me check her. She was sending me texts. I think this is it, ladies and gentlemen. A few more, like 3 or 4 other people sent me songs for the podcast. Oh yeah, and then the last thing. If Jay Cridlin, if you're listening, I've had a pretty full life as a comedian, and I saw on his Twitter all this, his praise for Burt Reynolds and all these other Floridian people. I'm from Florida, and I've done some pretty magnificent things, and I think another one of the gross infractions of this incident was that the more interesting things, he could have talked to me about my life or Louie Anderson about his life, were never asked. Why not ask Louie, why don't you come out the closet? It's never been a better time to be a gay person. I mean, that's an interesting question. If I was gay, I would be the flamboyant, proud kind of gay person. Yeah, okay. Ashna, I'm looking at her text messages. Yeah, she thought it was hilarious, but too long, and she thought that it would certainly make me look bad. Yeah. Anyway, so that's for you, my lovely listeners. I love you very much. I'm in Rosemont, Illinois. Finally, I have a week off in Los Angeles next week. Well, a week off. I'll be doing sets at the Comedy Store all week. I'm at the Laugh Factory Tuesday. I'm sure there'll be an improv or a few improv gigs thrown in there. And then on the weekend, I will be at the Comedy Store. So who knows? Maybe I'll run into Louie Anderson and we'll have a big chuckle about this. But I'm not afraid to go there anymore. And now the Comedy Store is my home. The last weekend of September, I'm in Atlanta at the Punchline. And then, as you know, my European listeners, I've got 5 weeks coming to Europe. I'm doing Portugal, Paris, Oslo, Ireland, and then Berlin. It's going to be great. Can't wait. That's it for now, mi amigos. Long may you run, my friends. Shalom, amigos y amigas. And if you're ever thinking about a career in journalism or comedy, try and have some integrity. And if somebody sincerely asks you not to include them on your story, try and be a decent person. Okay, that's today's lesson. Be good out there, everybody. I love you. Just remember, Tom Rhodes is your friend.